Hello, welcome back to Shak's Talks. I'm Shakti, and I just got back from Contact in the Desert. So today I'm going to give you a little breakdown of what I saw and what I experienced. This is the program guide for this year. Trying to see. There we go. I'm doing the thing with the mirror again behind my camera. Oh my goodness. Anyway, all right. This year was interesting. I went with a couple of friends this year instead of going by myself, and I felt like there were maybe a few less people than some of the years before, but it's hard to say. I don't know what the numbers are, and I was only at 2 days of lectures. I didn't stay for like all 5 days, but they did have things organized in a slightly different way this year where like most of the panels were on Friday, and then they had more of the lectures and then the workshops. They had kind of tapered things off as the days went on, whereas in years past, at least in my memory, they had more of everything happening on all the days, because there are regular passes where you can go see all the lectures, and then you have to buy special passes to get into like the workshops and intensives, which are just deeper dives with smaller audiences. So the first thing I saw on Friday was Unraveling Reality from Psychedelics to Synchronicity. The host was Clyde Lewis, and the panelists were Dr. Pascal Michael, who is a PhD in psychology. He studies DMT, near-death experiences, psychedelics, and encounters with entities. Anthony Peake, he is an author of 11 books on consciousness. Adam Apollo is a speaker who, apparently, according to his bio, has been featured at the White House and in United Nations summits and conferences globally. And his website is unify.org. So they are basically bringing people together to do global meditations and things like that, which a lot of different organizations do. Jason Quitt is the Qigong guy who does astral travel. He had a lot of experiences spontaneously and then wrote books about it, as many do. Out-of-body experience, wellness, and shamanism is kind of his topics that he covers. And Rizwan Virk, who is one of the simulation hypothesis people. He's a graduate of MIT and Stanford, and he ran play labs at MIT, and he's currently at Arizona State University. He is the author of The Simulation Hypothesis, The Simulated Multiverse, and Wisdom of a Yogi. And then Paul Hynek, he's the son of J. Allen Hynek, who was an American astronomer, professor, and ufologist working on, back in the day, Project Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book. And Paul Hynek is an MBA from Wharton and adjunct professor of finance and cryptocurrency at Pepperdine. He apparently was involved with making the movies Avatar, Lord of the Rings, and Planet of the Apes before helping to sell his company to James Cameron. And he's interested in the intersection between aliens, AI, DMT, and Bitcoin. And so the first question for this panel was, what is a synchronicity? Jason Quitt said alignment of simultaneous realities, like benchmarks in your life. Riz Virk said it's an organizing principle. And here's a quote that he brought in from Philip K. Dick that he shared. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in reality occurs. We have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, deja vu. Virk says that clues are there to guide you to the next step. Paul Hynek talked a lot about this book, Alien Information Theory by Dr. Andrew Gallimore. And basically this idea that DMT doesn't take you into an altered state, but it takes you into a more crystal clear, real reality, and it's a gateway to these other dimensions. And this is something that Gallimore was exploring in his book, it sounds like. I haven't read that yet. And I guess I could No, I'm going to skip this. I'm skimming because I really want to get down into some of the other stuff on day 2. Adam Apollo talked about how we are piloting down into these physical forms, and synchronicities are like nodal points. So they're like these important junctures in life. And he also talked a little bit about how it's really important not to view other people as NPCs, non-player characters, because that really reinforces a dangerous lack of empathy, which was a good point to bring up. And then Anthony Peake talked about his book, Cheating the Ferryman, and the idea of life beyond death and how synchronicity maybe has something to do with that. Dr. Pascal Michael brought up, he didn't really answer the question. He went off on another tangent, bringing up another question: are the entities giving us these plant medicines, are the crashed UFOs gifts? And how in indigenous shamanic cultures, plant medicine is all in service of a greater good. He wonders out loud, is there intentionality behind the beings? So as you can see, this whole panel, even though it's talking about synchronicity and psychedelics, because of the people on it, what it's really getting into is the nature of reality, and are psychedelics a tool to understand the nature of reality better? Are they simply a different filter through which we experience the data of reality? Are they somehow special tools that are being gifted to us by NHI or extra dimensionals? You know, there weren't a lot of clear conclusions in this panel, and everybody was just kind of like spinning out on these different ideas. So that's why I don't have a whole lot to say about it. It's like, cool, that's interesting, but it wasn't a very focused, you know, like a lecture where one person is presenting and they really craft kind of a thesis for that lecture, and then they take you on a journey to help prove the point that they're making. These people were just kind of like all over the place in this one, which is fine, and it's interesting just to hear people talk. But I will say that throughout the weekend, I was struck by the differences between the types of presenters and the types of speakers in general. You have more academic people. Some of the really like high level academia people just aren't that good at giving a lecture, and some of them are, you know, and some people have a talent for it and some people don't. So it's just interesting to observe. I still think it's important to put different kinds of people on stage. But in general, I tend to view that stage as kind of like a sacred responsibility, because first of all, you have an audience that is very open and interested in what you have to say. They're paying hundreds of dollars to be there. It's not like YouTube, like I can put anything out here and you can just click away if you don't like it. You know, it's not like I'm on a lecture stage taking up space and time. I'm really just creating an outlet for myself, and you can take it or leave it. So I do think that there's a responsibility when you go up to speak in public, and I feel like some people in the conference do a better job with that than others. That's just me. So then there was a live podcast recording with Ross Coulthart and Bryce Zabel, and I wanted to see Ross Coulthart in person because I watch him on News Nation a lot, and he's never been at the conference before, at least not as far as I know. And he hasn't been there any of the years that I was there, so I thought it would be cool to just go see him, get a vibe, you know, look at him in person and see what I thought. And he seemed like his same exact self, you know, that you see on the news, except for like you see, instead of just his face, like you see his whole posture, his whole demeanor, the way that he moves his body. And there's information in that, for me at least, when I observe people. So that was pretty interesting. And he did seem very kind of like focused, and also like probably taking in a lot if it was his first time at this conference. So it was just cool to see him out and about. They were talking about really surface level stuff in this talk, and I linked it below. I put all the links to all the different things if you want to check it out. But the Contact in the Desert YouTube is still continuing to update the videos that they are sharing. So not everything is out there yet, but some of them are getting posted. So after that, I popped over to another panel, which was UFOs, USOs, Unveiling the Mysteries of the Skies and Seas. And again, I felt like with these panels, there's a couple issues. Like, it is interesting to see a panel of people and get their different perspectives. I like that format, but it's a little bit problematic because you have a range of different types of people on the panel. Some of them are just there to promote their next documentary or their next book or whatever, and others are there to really truly share information. And some of them are just there to take up space, it seems like sometimes. Like, honestly, they just don't have a whole lot to say. Other times, the most quiet person is actually doing a service to everyone because they're not battling with all the egos, but they're just quietly exuding presence, and then you feel more drawn to that person and you want to go to their table and find out more. Like, I wish you had more time to talk. I really wanted to hear what you said. So again, there's a whole range of different things going on. But by the time I got over to this panel, they were in the question portion of it. So the audience had lined up to ask questions. And that's always such a free for all because just like, not everyone is made to be a public speaker. We're not all ready to ask a question. Sometimes your nerves get the best of you, it gets jumbled, or a lot of people go up there almost like they just want to give their testimony or they just want to take up a little time and get a little attention also. So it's a little bit chaotic, to be honest, but people were asking questions. I'm going to tell you just who was on this panel. This was Richard Dolan, Jim Ledwith, Byron Belitzos, Dean Alioto, Thomas Jane, and Daniel Sheehan. And the whole time, and Sheehan and Dolan are down at one end of the table, and I'm just like, I just want to hear them. I don't really want to hear what anyone else on this particular panel has to say, to be honest. It's like, these are the experts. These are the people that I want to hear from. And so it was cool that I did get to hear them talk a little bit. But basically what I heard was stuff that I've heard before, but I'll repeat it for you. So Sheehan talked about the beginning of remote viewing and how actually remote viewing started because of the Navy trying to figure out if they could have like submarine level communications, because if you're down on in a submarine deep down below the under the ocean, in order to get your communications you have to come up to a certain height and like stick an antenna up through the water, and then you become vulnerable. Like, then you can be caught on someone else's, like an enemy's radar. So they were testing out a lot of the Psi abilities on these submarines because this was something that proves to be effective at a distance, and people can be put inside of Faraday cages and different things like that. So there's really no limits to psychic communication that they have understood yet when it comes to like the physical limitations that happen with our regular communication devices. And one of the tests that they did back in the day was they took a mother rabbit and they took all the babies and they separated the babies out onto these different submarines, and then they took the rabbit mother and they observed her in some kind of lab. And then they would like start to torture one of the babies. I don't know why they have to do these horrific experiments, but this is what they did. They tortured the baby, and the minute they did it, there was a spike in the neural activity of the mother, even at a distance, which was really cruel and horrible. But basically what it showed them is that there is this connection, a nonverbal connection between these beings. And then they were like, well, if this is happening with rabbits, what could humans, So Lord only knows what other experiments they did, but he's telling these stories to help us remember how long ago all of this started and how effective it really was and what they might be doing today. So back in the 70s, I've told this story before on Shocks Talks because Sheehan has told it before, and I found it very important and fascinating. But Pat Price, one of the famous remote viewers, was the one who had a special knack for being able to basically astrally travel into like a building, open up a file cabinet, and read exactly what was on that paper. So his ability to access data from a distance was really great. And they decided to try a little experiment with him back in the 70s. So Just north of Michigan in Canada, there was a domed building with communications dishes, and they decided to put a helmet on Pat Price, and they asked him to think a particular message and then telepathically project it. And the message was pretty benign. It was just a test. It wasn't like a big influence, but they were like, just send the message that when it comes time to file your taxes, file them in this particular post office box in West Virginia. And so out of the community, and it was like an off the beaten path type of thing that wouldn't be a normal decision for people to make. And there was an 85% success rate with that experiment. So just to like put it back into perspective, human telepathic influence over like a whole population of people was 85% effective, like one human projecting a message back in the 70s. What are they doing today, you know? So just an interesting story from Sheehan. And then I'm going to skip down to another panel. Okay, so another panel that I saw on Friday was psionics, the profound power of the mind. So remember, psionics is the term that recently got popularized by Jake Barber in his interview on News Nation with Ross Coulthart, and it refers to another version of remote viewing, but it's the psychic component of the Skywatcher group and what they're doing to summon UAP. So just like Pat Price could project a message out and influence the people unknowingly, the psionic assets can project a message out and call in UAP. They can also have precognitive awareness of which types of UAP will be flying onto the range on a certain day, and they've had a high success rate. So basically what all of this means, what we all know, because you've been with me all along, right? Listening to all the shock stocks and you have all the background, it's, you know, this stuff isn't that shocking. It's just new ways of describing functions of consciousness. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it until there's something better or different, but Tom Campbell's theory of everything is the framework for reality, the model. It's a model. He always makes a point to say this. It's not like describing reality. It's a model to help us understand reality, and I find it to be the most useful model. It's so clear and simple and straightforward, and all of this stuff fits within it. So psionics is another term for another psychic capability or an ability to use consciousness in different ways. So the first question on this panel was asking everyone what psionics is, and the host is Hakeem Isler, I don't know how you say his last name. It's Isler, but Hakeem is the person who created the Psi Games 2025. So that I've also linked their website below. He seems like a pretty interesting guy, actually. And he also gave his own lecture that I listened to a recording of, just a little part on the way home. So that is linked below as well. But he's an expert in consciousness research, holistic health, and personal development. He's got a bachelor's degree in integrative health medicine, specializing in herbal medicine and extensive study in the 8 limbs of yoga. Hakeem integrates these practices with his hands-on experience as a wilderness explorer and survival instructor to offer a comprehensive approach to human potential. Man, that is so cool to me. I really want to learn more about this guy. I love all of that so much. And the little bit that I did get to hear him say, first of all, he's enthusiastic. He's got a good ability to host and to interact with all these different kinds of people. You can tell that he has his own psychic ability, because you can kind of tell that just from how someone interacts with other people, when they can really calibrate to each person individually and they know how to manage the energy. Like, that was apparent to me just in watching him host a panel. So I am very curious, and now I'm like, I kind of do want to go to this Psi Games, because a lot of cool people will be at it as well. And I love that he's into like holistic medicine and yoga and wilderness survival. I'm like, can we be best friends? Because these are all the things that like I just want to learn about and do. I think all of that makes so much sense. And I really loved how when he was talking about like our human potential, he was encouraging people to just learn what we're capable of before you start outsourcing it to AI, you know? And this is a big debate among a lot of the different presenters, you know? There's different people who are like super pro, just like, let's go, let's merge with the computer, post biological future, like that direction. And then there's the people who are like, that's cool and that's fine, but like we have all these consciousness capabilities and like we should tap into them probably. Like we can relearn a lot of the stuff that we've lost. We can understand each other better by observing these capabilities in others, which is why a presentation like the Psi Games can be really profound for people. Like for me, I don't really need a demonstration. I know these things are real. I have my own experience, but for some people, it's like they need to see it in action. And so watching people do demonstrations can be really profound. And actually, that's something that happened the day after I left. Diane Hennacy did a demonstration with some of her autistic kids that she works with, but I didn't get to see it. I just saw videos about it after the fact. But anyway, she was on this panel. So Dr. Diane Hennacy, we've all known her as Dr. Diane Hennacy Powell from the telepathy tapes, but she's dropping the Powell. That was her ex-husband. She had a whole little thing about it in her lecture that I went to. So let's remember it's just Hennacy, period, the end. Let's support her in that. And she is a neuropsychiatrist and internationally recognized expert on autism and savant syndrome. And her research focuses on the autistic children who have ESP as a savant skill. And she was featured in the Telepathy Tapes podcast, and apparently now they're making a documentary of that as well. Jesse Michels was on this panel, and he's the host of American Alchemy. He's got a history degree from Columbia. You know, Jesse Michels is young, but he is incredibly intelligent, and everybody knows it and comments on it. And the way his mind works is like a little encyclopedia. He just has a lot of information filed away that he can quickly pull on to reference. So he speaks very intelligently because everything is available to him. I don't know. My brain is not quite like that. I have to have notes, you know. I'm trying to train myself to be better at that, but I also have to work a full-time job where I have to be completely focused on what I'm doing for 40 hours a week. And so I can't be focused on my research 24/7 like some people. But I do think that it is probably something that he had his whole life. It seems to be his personality. And he's probably just like a little bit, you know, got his own special skills in that area. And then Tracy Garbutt Dolan, Richard Dolan's wife, a remote viewer, UFO researcher. She has a background in psychology and international studies and anthropology. Lisa Strickland is a PhD in philosophy and parapsychology. Carolyn Corey, author and filmmaker. She does consciousness stuff and health in the physical body. And Whitley Strieber, author and famous abductee. So, some of the cool points from this, and I'm just going to keep skimming through so I can cover more, but Diane Hennacy talked about the importance of combining intuition and logic, and it is critical for us to use our intuitions. So I think this is always a great reminder that even if you are a very serious scientific researcher and thinker and you're used to just operating from a logical place, you know, don't be afraid to combine both. She talked about how in her whole career, that's what really pushed her forward, is like, she is very logical. You can tell just by listening to her speak, but she also brought her intuition into the mix, and that's what put her on a really interesting path. Not to say that it wasn't without its challenges, because she's been through a lot of suffering as well. Tracy Garbutt Dolan, and she really reinforced this idea that, you know, I'm not special. We all have these capabilities, which is really important too, because some people who have an ability or access one of their psi abilities, they like to kind of become a spectacle, and there's always, no matter what, we're always dealing with ego, capitalism, and the patriarchy, you know, there's levels of privilege, there's different racial components, there's so many different things going on no matter what area of reality you're in. So even in this area of reality, there's all these different layers, and because of that, you get certain personalities who either want to be the great savior, or they want to be super special, or they're really exploiting the one experience that they had, or they really want to become a teacher, but in order to be the great teacher, they have to make sure everybody else feels inferior. So all these things can happen, and all these things are traps, and they're counterproductive to the evolution of humankind and all of our collective progress. So Tracy Garbutt Dolan did a really great service to us all by reminding us that I'm just normal like you, and I was not expecting this to happen, and it happened, and I really respect her for that. And she told a very personal story about one of her remote viewing exercises where she had that fully immersive kind of experience where you're accessing the target, but then all of a sudden you're there and you're seeing through that person's eyes. It was a human target in a specific location. She was able to smell the water and the moss and the, you know, all the things that were there she could pick up on. And it was like a full sensory remote sensing. Like we've talked about this before too on Shock's Talks, not just viewing, but full sensing. So it's thrilling to hear those stories. It doesn't necessarily mean that she has that ability all the time on repeat and she can just snap into any place and feel and see everything like I believe some remote viewers do. But it is very cool that she just had that unexpectedly, and that's a great reminder that that could happen to any of us. Carolyn Corey is interesting, and she does do a lot of cool experiments, but I will say that she was plugging herself a lot throughout this, and she was taking up quite a bit of space, and she was kind of cutting in and answering questions when I was hoping to hear a little bit more from some of the other people. So it was just a reminder to me again of like, it's an honor and a responsibility to be up on those stages, and it's good to have, like, I think it's a mark of your intelligence if you are aware of the people around you and sharing space with everybody and not trampling, not trying to, you know, like, and it also just reminded me that I don't like it when people are constantly plugging their stuff. And even as a little baby social media maker over here trying to sometimes make a TikTok account or make YouTube, it's like we're all experimenting and we all feel the pressure to try to say things like, oh, please like the channel or the video. And, you know, there's videos that train you how to do this. They're like, don't forget to do this and don't forget to do that. And everybody's just doing their best. But when I see that stuff, it just turns me off. So I'm just kind of making that mental note to myself that, like, it's not necessary. It's really not necessary. And I think we just get lost sometimes and we think we have to fight so hard to promote everything, but let the work speak for itself, you know? And I don't know. I just feel like I think she took up a lot of space promoting herself, and it was hard to hear beyond that, even though I know she does do really interesting work. Luckily, towards the end, she did make a comment about an experiment that she did with psychokinesis or telekinesis, about moving objects at a distance by giving them a command, and that was quite interesting, and I am curious about that experiment, so I will follow up and look at some of her films again to see where I can find that. But yeah, this is just, you know, Shakti's impression of Contact in the Desert. I'm not doing a full report, I'm doing more like my experience of it this year. And then this was a very cool synchronistic moment for me during the psionics panel. So I have a habit of, I can hear my own inner commentary going on while I'm listening to this panel. And so it's almost like if we were all allowed to be like hecklers in the audience, but you're like a psychic heckler. So sometimes you're just like, yeah, cool, good point. Other times you're like, oh my God, come on, let somebody else talk, you know, or whatever. And those things are going on in my mind as I'm listening and I'm aware of them. And I'm just kind of also testing the waters to see like who's actually psychic in here. Can anybody hear me? Is anybody on stage picking up on what I'm putting down? Is anybody in the audience? You know what I mean? I'm always doing these experiments out in the world. And sometimes I do get feedback where somebody will give me a very knowing look or will have a little moment. So there have been times where I've had that happen. But during this, Hakeem started asking, like, how can we all advance towards more of these abilities? And people were just kind of saying different things, but nobody was really saying anything that I felt like was that interesting. And in my mind, I'm like, I kept thinking, like, leave kids alone. Just leave kids alone and don't tell them that they're crazy from the beginning, and they'll just develop that way. Like, it's innate. Kids are always picking up on so much more. Just let them be. Help cultivate those abilities in them instead of shutting them down. And I was like, God, I wish somebody would say that, you know? And then Whitley Strieber did say that. And I was like, ooh, like, were we having a telepathic moment? Like, did he pick up what I was putting down, what I was projecting out? Or did I pick up what he was thinking? Or was that thought present in some other way and we both picked up on it and he was the one that had the ability to speak to it, you know? And I just love to consider all of the possibilities when it comes to how information travels, because there are so many. Maybe a non-physical entity plopped that thought into the room and we both picked it up and then Whitley was the one to say it. Or maybe we just simultaneously had the same thought. You never know. But it was one of those cool moments to have in the midst of a psychic panel. And it kind of made me just smile. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, that kind of thing happens all the time. But it's a nice little feeling of confirmation. Okay, a couple of us, maybe there were like 10 of us in the audience that were thinking that all at the same time, you know? So then we have Diane Hennacy's lecture. So she worked, this was on Saturday morning. She worked in the Cambridge Hospital during John Mack's time at Harvard. And if you remember, John Mack wrote that book Abduction that I just finished a little while ago. And he's obviously a famous abduction researcher and people talk about him all the time. And he interviewed the Ariel school kids from Rua, Zimbabwe, things like that. So it was interesting that Diane Hennacy had a little link to him and they knew each other early in their careers. I never knew that. And then she talked about an experience she had working at that hospital where she met a psychic woman. And basically the woman had some tests run, but she psychically knew they were going to come out normal and she wanted to leave the hospital early. And so she was asking Diane Hennacy to let her go. She's like, I'm already psychic. I already know this is going to happen. Please let me leave. And Diane, doing her job, was like, well, let me like ask you a few questions, like trying to get her to cooperate with her instead of just forcing her to stay or, you know, kind of overpowering her with her position of power that she was in. Instead, she just tried to connect to her. And during that time, the woman was like, yeah, I have like psychic information about you, you know, and your future. And she told her some things about her husband and about some decisions that he was getting ready to make and some possible paths for their future. And it all turned out to be pretty real. And so that was like just one of those personal stories that probably sparked her on this anomalous path. And as many people who are on this path know, you have a lot of those moments that kind of awaken you to a different layer of reality and you can't ignore it, even though it's outside of your comfort zone or outside of the norm. And so she talks about how she had an understanding early on that neuroscience was incomplete and she needed extraordinary evidence to help her to prove that. And working with autistic savants was her path. And she talked about how telepathy was a good candidate for studying these anomalous abilities because the feedback is immediate as opposed to like precognition with no timeline, because somebody could predict a future event, but you might have to wait years or decades for that thing to happen. She talked about this person, Kim Peek, who was the character that the Rain Man was based around. And this was someone who had an anomaly in the brain that a lot of, well, not a lot, but some people do have, where like usually the two hemispheres are connected by this certain infrastructure, but sometimes that's missing and then there's just water there instead. And so things shouldn't be able to function to cross over, and like the hemispheres shouldn't be able to unite in the typical way, but somehow it's still working. And these people have all these savant skills also in certain cases. And so, for example, with Kim Peek, he could read two different books, one with each eye simultaneously, and like process the information, or he could read one book, but like 2 pages at one time. So he could read with one eye each page simultaneously. That's just so fascinating to think about. Some of these people could like then repeat back thousands of books that they've read word for word. But what's interesting about this, and what I will say here, is something that I think Diane Hennacy was also getting to, because she talked about the Akashic Records. And she kind of asks the question, is the hill that they talk about in the telepathy tapes just the Akashic Records? Because the nonverbal autistic people that are going there do talk about like learning things there, almost like it's this like library of information. And that's the whole notion of the Akashic Records, which I've done videos on as well. But basically, in Tom Campbell's theory, none of this stuff is that crazy, you know, and you don't need to understand all the inner workings of the brain to understand that in a consciousness reality, consciousness can bypass physical matter reality. So even if there's an anomaly going on in the brain that doesn't allow it to function as it should, that's okay, because we're not actually limited by the physical. We can transcend it. So that's why certain consciousness is actually more free in these strange scenarios where their physical body and mind isn't working as it should. Their consciousness is just more free and has a more pure and easy access to data and information. So maybe it's like, it's not like someone's two eyes are actually reading 2 pages, but their consciousness is unbounded and they are accessing the data of those 2 books simultaneously, because that's like a level of consciousness that they have access to. Same thing with like all of the telepathy experiments. It's like she's starting to ask more questions about what's really going on. You know, are these kids somehow, do they just have more hyper developed senses? Like some animals can see a greater spectrum of color, or they can hear more than humans. Do these nonverbal autistic folks have just special, like, are we going to find anomalies in their body that tell us that, oh, they can actually just perceive more? So when they see a person, because they talk about seeing auras, so she brought up this idea of light, and maybe there's like information encoded in the light, and when they see people, they can kind of see what they're thinking. And all these theories, I'm just thinking like, this is very cool. And yes, we do want to understand these from our physical matter reality perspective through our typical sciences, but actually we can just bypass all of that if we tap into the consciousness studies part of this and just understand that none of that matters. Consciousness can go beyond all the physical functions. So there's infinite ways that people can access data, and there may not be a set pattern that unites any of these people. They might all have their own different way, or they might have the same. You know, it's all, I think the universe itself gives us these opportunities to study it and understand it better through these subsets of humanity. So like this subset of humanity, the nonverbal autistic folks, are a special group of souls that are presenting us with an opportunity to understand them and reality better through our typical scientific lens. And that is really cool, and I am really grateful for it. I just think it's funny because I do think sometimes people start to really fixate on needing to understand the mechanics completely. And in a way, it kind of doesn't matter. It's like the thing is happening, you know? But it does matter. I'm not saying it totally doesn't matter. I'm just saying, you know, we can still understand it without science explaining it, and it can still happen without science explaining it. And it is happening every single day. So it's pretty fascinating. I went to an Yvonne Smith lecture, but I just popped in for like half of it. She's the one that works with abductees. She wrote the book Chosen and some other books. Her organization is CERO, CERO. And she was showing more videos from her clients, her abductees, and how basically it was a lot of videos of helicopters. These people get harassed, these people who see orbs and craft and things on a regular basis. For whatever reason, if the stuff is coming around them, then also these other programs that can like pick up the stuff on radar, whether it's an orb or a craft or whatever's going on. And so they tend to fly around and kind of harass these certain abductees, or at least that's what the people perceive. That's what they think is going on. So she was showing a lot of those videos, and then she was talking more about how, and this never happened early in her career, but over the last couple years, people started channeling directly to her. So before she was using hypnotherapy to help people retrieve lost memories. Now she's getting direct messages. But I'm skeptical of this. It is kind of the whole Dolores Cannon way, and the QHTT people are super into this, and all of a sudden everybody is channeling and everybody has messages for Earth and for the people. But I'm sorry to say it, but like none of them are actually that unique or profound. So I just think it's important, again, pulling from Tom Campbell's work, and just to say that like we can get very sensationalized by this like phenomena and this idea that, oh my God, a being is channeling and talking to me and all this. It's like, okay, well, guess what? This is normal. This is actually normal in our reality because of consciousness. So consciousness is this connective tissue, and we are physical beings, but there are other beings, and they're non-physical, and they're in other dimensions and this dimension. Some of them might have bodies in this dimension. If they're actual physical ETs from other planets, we don't know yet. We don't have totally conclusive evidence when it comes to that, at least not in a public way. But what we do know is that people have been connecting with non-physical intelligence for all of time, for all of our history. So angels, demons, whatever you want to call it, fairies, dead people, being a medium, being this, being that. And what Tom Campbell says is all this stuff is great, but what people mess up on a lot is that they hook onto labeling what it is they're talking to. And we have to think of it more openly, like analyze the quality of the exchange, take the information, do what you will with it, but do not get caught up in whatever identity the thing is trying to tell you that it is. And I think this is like one of the most important lessons for all of us, no matter what, because whether you are even a spiritual woo-woo type person, guess what? You're still picking up on these non-physical communications. And think about what we just learned about Pat Price and the secret programs and projecting telepathic messages into people's minds that actually did influence them to do things. So we all have to be constantly aware. This is like a vigilance that we have to develop, is understanding through meditation practices of whatever kind you like. Who am I? What are my thoughts? And what is coming from outside of me? And even if I can't separate it out, it's all just one clump of thoughts, and I don't know what's coming from where or who it's coming from, that's okay. What do I want to do about those thoughts? Because I'm the one that gets to make the choices. I'm the free will awareness unit that's moving through this body in this life, and all that information is there, and I can parse it out. So like meditation is a tool for learning to just track and observe all the stuff that's passing through the mind at any given time. And there will be a combination of data streams and information, and also like messages from your own body and the environment around you. And it's up to us to figure out like what we're doing with that. So back to channeling, we don't know who these messages are coming from. And a certain entity, for example, might spend years developing a relationship with one being, and that might be very fruitful for that being. That's great. But they could spend years prepping you and then walk you off a cliff also. That's possible. They could be subtly influencing your choices and kind of taking away some of your free will, or they could be just wasting your time. You know what I mean? And in Jason Quitt's book that I got, and I'll do a full breakdown when I finish it, but I just started reading it, he talks a lot about his astral experiences. And in one of them, he was out of his body, and this message was getting projected into his mind, hovering from right over his bed behind him. And it was convincing him, like, you are very sick. You are going to die. You need to start making preparations and telling everyone what's going to happen. And he felt completely flooded with emotion, and he felt so sad, and it all felt so real. And then he like popped out of his body or whatever, and he saw that this message wasn't coming from inside of him. It was coming from some entity, and he grabbed it by the hand and he said, are you like a being of the light? Like, are you good, or are you or not, you know? And it had to say no, because like it couldn't be false in that astral realm. It has to answer directly. And he said it looked like a glorious angel. And had he just seen it, he would have thought this is some angelic being, but it was actually a little menace. It was just a little mischievous whatever, you know? And Tom Campbell would even say that maybe it wasn't even a being. Maybe it was just the larger consciousness system itself, the game itself, just testing you out, trying different things, checking to see if you're alert, checking to see if you're paying attention. You know, certain people are on a special training path when it comes to this stuff, so they will get a lot of extra special tests and experiences in order for them to level up, learn something, grow, evolve. And at the end of the day, we just have to be super alert and not get hooked onto especially the ideas that feed our egos when it comes to whatever we're talking to. I am such and such from the 7th degree galactic federation of lightning and thunder, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many different layers of what people like to say that they're talking to, and let's be honest, we don't know. But what we do know is how the information makes us feel, what we can do with it. We can find out if it's verifiable or not, if it's just like a bunch of nonsense and jibber jabber. You know how the AI now has been so like complimentary to everyone? It's just blowing smoke up your ass most of the time, you know what I mean? It's like these beings could be doing the same thing, the larger consciousness could be doing the same thing, the system itself. Why would it do that? I don't know, but our job is to just take it for what it is and not get too caught up. So when Yvonne Smith started talking about all this channeling stuff, I'm kind of like, okay, you know, she's getting messages that you're very important. Disclosure's not going to come from the government. It's coming from the abductees. And that's a fine message. There's nothing super wrong with that. But like realistically, it looks like disclosure has been happening for quite some time now in whatever way it can. And it's coming from every angle. It's not just the government. It's not just the abductees. It's not just the independent researchers. It's everybody. It's coming from all directions because consciousness is evolving and we're all opening up to a larger reality. And so we have access to more information. And that is across the board, in my opinion. So then we had Chris Bledsoe. He is the UFO of God guy. His whole talk was mostly him retelling stories from his book, and I've read his book, and it was cool. He was pretty emotional. I think it was one of his first times doing this in this setting, so that one was very personal. It was very much about the struggles he went through and his really dark times, but how he's like happy now. And you know, you have to read his book or go back and check out my episode where I cover the details of his book, because that's pretty much what his talk was. Jesse Michels interviewed Richard Dolan, and I linked a little snippet of that below, but that will probably be published on American Alchemy and on Richard Dolan's site, because it was like a podcast recording, and I went to that, and that was pretty cool. And then I want to close it out with Kelly Chase. Kelly Chase was the highlight of the whole thing for me, and she's kind of newer on the scene, but she's so smart, so interesting. She delivered in every way. She came so well prepared. Her slides were immaculate. She's an intellectual thinker. She does tons of research. She really puts her all into it. She pulls from all the really interesting, relevant sources. She referred to Daniel Elizondo, a researcher who's younger also, who has a lot of cool stuff out there. And she brought in Jacques Vallée into her conversation. And then she really talked about kind of an expansion of what we went over in my last episode with the disinformation tactics, but it was like her own kind of modern take on this idea of like the UFO narrative, all the world's a stage. So I'm going to read you a couple of her slides directly from her speech. So the first one, in the world of UFO secrecy, no one gets to just be human. You're cast as a hero or a heel, patriot or traitor, savior or psyop. This binary framing isn't accidental. It keeps the conversation theatrical and emotionally charged while making deeper truths, while masking deeper truths that lie beyond character. So just to break this down again, she's pointing out the fact that there are these dramatic, theatrical, dynamic sort of battles going on, this binary version of the story that sits on top of the truth, the information. And it's so engaging and it's deliberate and it's meant to keep us in that, like, what about this? What about that? I don't trust this person. I do trust this person. Oh, now I can't believe them. Oh, da, da, da. It's like the Us Weekly, if you remember back in the day, the tabloid magazines of like all the celebrities and stuff. It's like that level of what's going on, and it keeps us like entertained and engaged. It gives us something to chew on, and it has nothing to do with the reality of what's going on. So this is all about getting to the deeper truth. And she talks, so like the hero or the heel, that's like a wrestling thing. The heel is, you know, like the bad guy, or, you know, the one that the stupid fool or whatever, and the hero is like this, you know, savior figure. This is from one of her slides as well. In high stakes arenas like UFO disclosure, heroes are often built to fall. Their rise earns public trust. Their collapse discredits the entire movement they helped inspire. Sometimes the fall is organic, sometimes it's orchestrated. Either way, the effect is the same: disillusionment, division, and delay. When the hero goes down, the narrative goes with them. So we are immune from this because we are studying this from looking at the big picture, the whole thing. As you recognize, as I always talk about this, God, I'm losing it. Every time a new whistleblower comes on the scene, or a new person who just feels like the next big thing, you know, that would really hook someone who has no idea about the whole history of this. And then if you hooked onto that character and they disappointed you or they failed you in some way, you might lose interest in the whole topic. But if you're like us and you've been studying this for so long from all the different angles, you're not in any danger. You're going to be fine. You see people come and go. You see people rise and fall. And you see that, like, sometimes we change our minds about people over time, and sometimes we get turned off by someone just because their personality isn't great and we don't mesh with them, but they still have some interesting information and it's worth looking at. So it's all about the big picture. It's all about sticking with it. Don't get caught up in that surface level story. It's too easy to be manipulated that way. She talked about perception management, the art of shaping what people believe without them realizing it. And governments and intelligence agencies use media outlets, credentialed experts, and trusted influencers to guide belief. And this is so real. Oh God, especially when it comes to scientists and academic thinkers. It's like it's like the NPR voice, for example. Like, some people can only get their news from NPR, and if it's not that style and that voice and that exact person, it's not real, it's not legit, I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? Or whatever it may be. But it's like, the point is, this is all very orchestrated and guided, and it's all meant to control you and keep you in a nice little cozy little manageable box where we can make sure you stay where you're supposed to be and don't think too far beyond that. Because if you do, we're going to make you look stupid and feel stupid, and we're going to draw attention to you that you don't want. And yeah, anyway, tactics of control. Go see the last episode. So she said this part of it is not even about censorship. It's about preloading your conclusion before you even ask the question. So it's kind of the ongoing brainwashing of it all. And then our own worst enemies. Belief isn't passive. It can be used to influence, disarm, and control. In the UFO world, narratives are designed not just to inform, but to shape your worldview. The most effective PSYOP, that's a psychological operation, is the one you run on yourself. And then this part I thought was so interesting, this vulnerability in the void. The UFO phenomenon dismantles consensus reality. In that liminal space where old beliefs collapse but new ones haven't formed, people are vulnerable. That vacuum gets filled quickly by charlatans, ideologues, and members of the intelligence community aiming to shape public narratives. This is really about how vulnerable you are when you are just in the midst of having your world shattered. I don't know if you can hear the rain, but it's starting to pour and it's so nice. Rain break. That's so nice. So this vulnerability in the void thing is really about anyone who's entering into the anomalous community, the paranormal community, spiritual awakening community, or just dipping their toe in the UFO, UAP, alien waters. There's gonna come a moment, and it's either something that you get to through an unexpected experience that you have, or something that you learn out in the world. But there will come a moment where you see like, holy shit, this reality is not what I thought it was. Not only is it not what I thought it was, but I've been lied to. I've been manipulated. And then the whole world just starts to unravel. It's that Matrix moment, you know? And that is a very big deal that takes sometimes years to process. Like when that first starts to happen, things are so shaken up that you could be led astray so easily, because basically you've reached a point where you realize like, oh my God, like the craziest things that I never thought could be real are actually real, because I either experienced it myself or I got enough evidence to like get it, you know? And then other people can take advantage of that, because then think of all the other things that are possible. And you're just in a vulnerable position. So basically that part to me is just about like, we all have to be sensitive to people that are in this community who are maybe getting off on a side quest, you know, and like maybe that's to each their own, and everybody has to go down their own side quests and get lost, and maybe that's none of our business, you know, but maybe we can help each other a little bit and protect each other a little bit. Keep an eye out for the vulnerable. Don't take advantage of it. Don't do that. I went to this energy worker recently, and I was pretty furious actually after it, because I've had really profound experiences in energy work. I still think that she stirred things up a little, and I was able to take that and run with it and use it to my advantage. But I was pretty pissed because she was trying really hard to, after our first session, basically say like she had a formula, you know, she identified this huge traumatic thing, and then she basically said, and I can help you fix that for like $2,500 extra if you do 6 more sessions. And I was like, that's okay, I'm good. But I just think that's the worst way to go about it. And energy work is real, and taking advantage of people for money is absolutely despicable, and you will definitely deal with the consequences of that. I'm not even going to say who it was because it doesn't matter. I'm not here to do that. And she's closing down her sessions. I might have said something if I felt like she was going to keep taking advantage of people, but she's actually moving towards some other version of how she's going to make money with just like teaching or whatever. But it really it inflamed my soul. You know what I mean? Because I'm smart enough to know exactly what is going on in those scenarios, and she really sold me, I really thought when I saw her work online, I thought this is someone who is tapped into something, and I need a little boost, and I need a little wiggling loose from this moment of stagnation. And I know that sometimes you need extra help from somebody on the outside, but it just wasn't right, and it wasn't damaging to me because I knew how to